for Pitu Angels to put them in that position to begin with, right? It's almost the dream position for this team to be able to try to make a little bit more progress. We already seen Golden Guardians get knocked out in 7th and 8th place in the past as well. So the point difference in those standings isn't some massive gap that they have to fulfill. And keep in mind, the top 6 teams here, Zyro, are going to be going on to the global finals later on.
Yeah, this is actually a big implication for our global finals later this year. Pitu's Angels is right outside. They're 30 points behind Golden Guardians right now. So if they're able to win this match, they'll be tied with Golden Guardians for 6th place, which is pretty insane for a team like Golden Guardians to be that far behind. So this is like almost a must-win match for Golden Guardians. So maybe there's just even more added pressure here.
There is. And, we've seen in the past where teams like Echo Nagura, when they already had that number 1 seed, they had it locked down after repeated wins. They would kind of they'd play some off-meta comps that we've seen in the past, but now they really can't do that because of how close Perplexed is to them. So even if they go into a week 4 scenario, the best teams are still going to be trying as hard as they possibly can to lock down that number 1 seeding.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a hard task for Echo and Perplex as well, to just make sure they have the points to get that seed that they want. And even though we qualify, of course, for LAN, no matter if you have the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed, the seeding is still going to be very important for the actual matchup that you have to be playing in that tournament later. So they really want to make sure they get the highest seed as they possibly can. So it's actually really even worse for Perplex that they somehow managed to lose this game here against PIME today. So now they're in this lower bracket, which is really something we don't expect Perplex to see in at all.
Yeah, most definitely. And Halls of Atonement was also one of the dungeons that we saw Golden Guardians playing against PIME. And some of I believe it was in the second to last boss's room here, Dranos, where just having Loyal Beasts going off just wrecked Golden Guardians' run, just having those simple mistakes, the simple errors kind of coming back to haunt them here.
Yeah, so on the one hand, Golden Guardians lost in this map by a lot as a result of that. On the other hand, their run was looking really good, right? And so even though they lost by a lot of time, they really lost by one pull going wrong, right? One thing that, if changed, would turn their run from a very bad run to a very good run. So I would say it's more of a good news story than a bad news one. Sure. It's much better to have one pull go wrong than an entire run with a lot of mistakes in it and with routing and composition that seems suboptimal. We did talk a little bit earlier, though, about that composition point. As we can see getting into game here, we have the Disc Priest, so no Paladin action coming out from either side, like we saw out of PIME, as both teams are getting started with their very first pulls. P2 Angels going right, Golden Guardians going left.
Yeah, it looks like Golden Guardians popping that Bloodlust Esther, gathering 2 shards together. So 2 Thrash casts, AoE casts coming out onto this group. Want to make sure that they have a lot of defensives available, as the Pain Sub is being used by JB to keep everyone alive. And also we have Raging here. That is an affix they can actually not get rid of because they don't have any class that can soothe it off. So they want to make sure they don't get the shards into Raging range whenever the Thrash is being casted.
Yeah, this is the Raging affix in this dungeon. There's a lot of ways that it's scary. There's also some ways, though, that it's beneficial. The fact that you can mind control those gargoyles when they're raging adds a lot of extra damage. It doubles their damage when they're on your side. So we've seen teams making good use of that at different points as well. So it's a little bit of pain, but also a benefit as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen teams use this affix differently, right? Some teams thought it's better to just not get the gargoyles into raging range and just immediately mind control them, because of course the damage that you put into the gargoyle is completely wasted because you don't get any percentage from them except getting the raging buff on them, right? So is the damage that you lose from having to get them low worth it for the damage that you gain from having raging on them? So that's really something that the teams are disagreeing on sometimes, as some teams are pushing them low and some are not. So we'll see what Pitu's Angels and Golden Guardians are doing here with their gargoyles and their Venthyr Covenant advantage in this dungeon, as we see the other shard pull by Pitu's Angels, and it looks really clean so far by them. I mean, they've executed those pulls really cleanly.
Yeah, oh, look at the damage, though, that's coming out here. Knight is under so much pressure with the Necrotic stack. It looks like actually just one Necrotic stack, but the Raging Kite at the end of the pull there. Looks like they're able to manage things pretty well, but right into this Manifestation of Pride, This is something that is a little scary to go into low health, but it looks like they've stabilized and are going to be able to kill off this Pride. So P2 Angels at 41% count, working on their second Pride. Golden Guardians slightly ahead on count. They've gone through the dungeon the other side first. Actually, now they're tied on count, but they are ahead on their Pride. So they're about half a Pride's worth of health ahead of P2 Angels. But they still have this right-hand side to do rather than the left-hand side, which maybe involves a little bit more running. Let's see how it works out as Yoda is going to get started grabbing this next set of enemies. I expect that they'll be going all the way to that final shard of Halkias here. And I expect the same thing for P2. They'll be jumping down and going all the way to their final shard as well.
This is really looking like it's taking them a really long time to finish off this Pride here, as now the Touch of Death came out of the Windwalker to make sure they're finishing this off. But yeah, it took them quite a long time to get done with this Pride. So we'll see what kind of pull they're gathering now with that Pride buff, as they were waiting a little bit to get everyone back up to full HP before they're gathering the Shard and also the Stoneborn. Immediately getting mind controlled here by the Venthyr DK, so they're definitely not getting into raging range. On the other hand, Golden Guardians is dealing with that 60% Pride now, so definitely making up quite a bit of time because of that Pitu Angels time loss by just taking so long for that 40% Pride.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's still very close actually between these two teams. I mean, no deaths on the board right now. The Pride's still about half a Pride in favor of Golden Guardians, but P2 a little bit closer towards where they're going to need to go after this, right? Golden Guardians are going to have to kind of run around and jump down, whereas P2 are basically right where their next pull is going to be. It's really going to come to a head on this pull onto the boss. Both teams, I expect, will be pulling a lot of trash onto that boss and making as much use of as many gargoyles as they can. Let's see how it works out as Yoda gets ready to hop down there. They're going to be grabbing, you can see marks coming out. They're starting to prepare which enemies are being grabbed. And this is a lot of stuff. Here comes all at once for Golden Guardians. This is so scary with the Necrotic Affix as well. Yoda is going to be under so much threat. He does have access to one Kyrian file to clear out his stacks at some point. Oh, but Lip is really low. Barely survives the pain suppression and the barrier immediately used by JP there to save as much damage as possible on Yoda. And Yoda is just staying as topped as he can, trying to prevent the damage and as many necrotic stacks as possible. I mean, he's on very, very few stacks here. The Ring of Peace is going to prevent the last few mobs from connecting with him, and this was really well handled. The Stoneborn gets pushed into raging range and then gets mind controlled so that it can help out even more with damage on Halkias, and things are looking very good here for the Golden Guardians. Meanwhile, P2 just starting a similarly sized pull in our smaller screen.
Yeah, I mean, this can really quickly get out of control, especially if you just put all of those mobs into raging range and then you don't have enough damage to finish them off, especially because there's a bunch of casters as well, obliterators, who just do a huge amount of magic damage to the tank if not interrupted. So if they're in raging range, you definitely want to make sure you finish them off very quickly. And yeah, Pitu Angels looks like they dealt with the trash really nicely on their side as well. They're now also up to 79% trash. They're getting the Stoneborn a little bit closer, it looks like. They're just cleaving it down into that raging range before they mind control it with that Venthyr Covenant. And it looks like Golden Guardians just finishing off that last Houndmaster that is going to be triggering their 80% Pride. I think so far we've seen almost all teams actually play that 80% and not skip it with Invis Potions. So we'll see what Golden Guardians is going to be doing here.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be able to skip it because they have that mind-controlled gargoyle anyways, so that's going to make getting out of combat with it pretty tricky. So they are just going to go ahead and kill it. And yeah, like you said, most teams have decided to kill this rather than skip it. It is a little bit tricky to skip because you also then want to skip to the next boss. And so there's, you can't skip infinite number of times. Teams may try and figure out a way to make that happen at some point. Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically do that, but at that point, you're running through without being mounted, so you're losing time on that. And then, at some point, the benefit of the Pride is also worth being factored in. As you can see, P2 are trying to do just about the same thing. They have a mob in under their Halkias as well, as it is about to die. But Golden Guardians are almost done with this Pride already, and they will be then trying to execute their skip here. This is something that will hopefully this is actually one where the faster you can execute this skip, the better. Not just because you gain time on the skip, but because you have more prideful uptime on the next boss, right? You get to deploy more of that buff on the boss versus using it just to run a little bit faster through everything. So you can see they're going to run through, use that Ring of Peace to keep the mobs away from them. Everybody's going to meld, and then they're going to waste no time in pulling Echelon here. and try and deal as much damage as they can while they still have all of those buffs available. The power infusion, the combustion used right away, and you can see fired up, making great use of those cooldowns, bursting above 20,000 damage on single target. Incredible, incredible work there, as he's then gonna pop into melee range, use the shifting power to hurt not just Echelon, but all the ads as well. Beautiful min-maxing of damage here that is gonna leave Echelon almost at half health already here, and this is a tyrannical key as well, so that is doubly impressive.
Yeah, and you'll also have to keep an eye on who I'm Fired Up is actually dispelling as well, because he's, of course, the curse dispeller, so he can dispel that curse that stuns you after just a few seconds. Usually we do see mages just completely ignore everything else and dispel themselves, not regarding anyone else, but we'll see what they do here. Oh, so the ice block just being used to get rid of this and not dispelling anyone else. See, that's what I like to see. Good job! As I'm Fired Up is just completely ignoring his teammates. Well done.
Yeah, that's most mages I know, they don't even have party frames on. The only information they have from the rest of the group is the power infusion cooldown. They track that, about a quarter of their screen is that, and then everything else is irrelevant from the rest of the team.
And then there's just a macro that whispers them PI me whenever it's ready, like every 10 seconds.
Should macro it into their fireball.
Yeah.
Ooh. JB escapes there. Was that the Night Fae blink away from getting jumped on top of? Great job avoiding that damage. Is playing the Night Fae in this dungeon. We've seen the Discipline Priest. Actually, I think that it's, in fact, a difference in this very run. Because it looks like it might be a Kyrian Discipline Priest on the side of Pitu Angels. Discipline Priest, it is the spec that we've seen the most different covenants chosen on. We've seen all 4 at different times in this MDI. The Fae, though, ends up being the best one for supporting the mage because of those Fae Guardians. Really even further increasing the cooldown reduction on combustion. Here, though, is going to be the most important pull of the dungeon. If Golden Guardians can execute this well, they're going to be in great shape for this dungeon. But the last time they were in this dungeon, this was the pull that they wiped to. This was the pull that lost them this run against PI Me. So hopefully they're able to figure this one out. The power infusion and the barrier, once again, deployed right at the start of the pull to get as much value as possible against this brutal necrotic affix, really trying to prevent that damage before it happens rather than healing it after the fact. You can see Yoda stacking up very quickly there. Doesn't have his Last Resort available, but he will actually soon. It's almost off cooldown. So once that's available, that'll be a big extra defensive layer for him as the Metamorphosis is about to expire here. So he's now would be in trouble, but all the mobs are dead. So very well done by Golden Guardians. They've managed to make this pull that got them last time. They've instead got the better of it this time.
Yeah, well done by Golden Guardians to be able to execute this pull here that caused them so much trouble yesterday. Really cleaned up their play, making sure they get all of those interrupts on the Houndmasters as well, which can't be interrupted normally, by the way. It needs to be stunned or disoriented or knocked, so definitely need to make sure they have one of those abilities ready to just interrupt that Loyal Beast cast, so the Gargants do not enrage and don't destroy the tank. Definitely can cause huge issues if you don't have an interrupt for it. As they're already down to 24% on the boss on this tyrannical keystone here, a huge amount of single target damage with the Gargants as well, with the Gargoyles, that they mind controlled at the very start. It really looked like they were not waiting for the Stoneborn to be in raging range on this pull specifically. They just immediately mind controlled it to get the AoE damage as well from that Stone Breath as well, because of course this is a very difficult pull, so you want to make sure you have as much damage as possible. It's interesting to think about it too, because it might actually be a time save if you have the damage from on the boss later on, right? But it's just too risky to pull off for them at least.
There's several incentives. So when you have a mind-controlled gargoyle, you actually have a 10% damage reduction across your group as well. So that's a reason to mind control one early in a dangerous pull. And by the time you mind control it, the other stuff might be dead already. So it's nice to get the AoE damage on them by mind controlling it at the start. And if you don't mind control it, you have to deal with it hitting and stone breathing your tank and your group. So in a really dangerous situation, I think mind controlling it early does make sense. However, for time, like you said, theoretically, if you could survive not mind controlling it, it would probably be faster to rage it and get the double single target damage later on in the fight. But I think that the decisions they've made about when to mind control each gargoyle in this dungeon have looked like the right ones at every point so far, as they are going to be spawning now their final Prideful. Pitu Angels also on 0 deaths. Very impressive run coming out from them. They're working on that third boss as well. Just a hair slower than where Golden Guardians are, though. This run is looking so well polished from Golden Guardians.
Yeah, I do think that the fastest run we've seen so far in Halls was 13 minutes and 31 seconds by PIME against Golden Guardians yesterday. So we'll see if Golden Guardians can actually beat that time. Of course, Golden Guardians had this full team wipe yesterday, so they couldn't show us what their best time is in this dungeon. But with this clean run on 0 deaths, they definitely can show us what they can do here. Even without adapting to this Holy Paladin meta, they still seem to be having a really, really fast run.
Yeah, I mean, the Holy Paladin meta wasn't something that anybody knew about in this dungeon until yesterday, so it's not it's not like they've had a lot of time to adapt to it. But yeah, I mean, I think that they are going to come in a little bit later than that 13-minute 30 marker that PIME set. The other teams that we saw in this place mostly hit the 14-minute mark yesterday. We had that really close game where two teams were basically exactly on the 14-minute mark. I think Golden Guardians are going to land right around there, which, we're fired up. Getting hit by that statue is going to survive, but a scary moment
The rune, you can't walk out of it.
That's true, it does root you.
The rune of power.
Yeah. So, a good run from Golden Guardians, a good run from Pitu Angels as well. There aren't big mistakes from both teams. Both teams executing the same pattern of pulls that we've seen work for basically everybody, doing this dungeon in the fewest pulls reasonably possible. But still, it seems like there are ways that both teams could probably squeeze a few more seconds out of this place with some, further iteration.
Yeah, definitely. As Pitu's Angels Adrian dropping incredibly
1%
low,
HP.
did manage to recover. And yeah, I mean, shout out to Pitu's Angels as well. Of course, they're not going to be winning this because Golden Guardian has this incredibly clean and fast run, but really impressive by Pitu's Angels to also have such a fast run with 0 deaths. Very clean compared to yesterday where they had shown some issues here and there. But Golden Guardians just about to down that last boss, and it looks like they're having a 14 minutes and 12 seconds. So still really fast run by Golden Guardians as they win this first dungeon against Pitu's Angels.
That's right. Golden Guardians coming out strong today with that victory, having the kind of run that they really want to be able to have, taking game number 1 over Pitu Angels. And we've been talking about it as well, Zyra, with how the meta has been shaping up. And I know you had a couple thoughts on how much work it takes to be able to prep for not only the dungeons but any sort of comp swap that's going to start affecting everything as well. Of course, Paladin can't be Paladin can't be Night Elf. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I don't want to take anything away from Golden Guardians as well. That was a super clean run from them, and it'll definitely compete with the top teams. But I think it's really interesting. We've been talking about this all weekend, right? Like, why haven't more teams adapted to the Holy Paladin Shadow Priest comp that we see PIME run? And I think it's actually a super unique scenario, right? Where PIME actually has a really good comp where the only thing they really have to do to swap their comp around is they have Curry, who is somebody who's played Shadow Priest a lot on live already, just swap to playing Shadow Priest and not really make any other changes to their comp. And that's perfect for even dungeons like Mists, where they can have Clicks play a Boomkin. He's played a Boomkin in the past. He's played a Boomkin on live for a long time. Excuse me, sorry. And they have their healer just swap to Holy Paladin. And I want to use Golden Guardians as an example here because it's not an easy swap for them at all. Yes, JB has played a Holy Paladin on live, so he's probably pretty intimate with how the class works and he can play it just fine. But then you look at the DPS comp they run. You keep fired up on Mage, right? He's one of the best mages in the world. He'll stick to that easily. But then you look at their other 2 DPS players, right? You have Lip on the DK right now. So in dungeons where you want to use a DK for your second DPS, that means you'd have to have Shakib go to Shadow Priest. And as far as I'm aware, Shakib has literally never played a Shadow Priest on live. So he'd have to learn how to play the class on its own. Not to mention the fact that he'd have to actually figure out how to play the sort of support aspects of the class in addition to having to do good DPS throughout the course of the dungeon, space out your cooldowns, learn how to play it properly to make sure you live through everything. It's actually a pretty steep learning curve. So while they might have time between now and the next cup to actually prepare for that and learn how to play that, being able to do that within a week is something that's a pretty tall order even for some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, probably not even a full week as well, because once people started seeing time trials, there was 5 days or something like that until the cup really started coming around. So it really, starts shuffling the deck a lot in terms of the responsibilities that you have for pretty much the entire team, like you were mentioning there. And thankfully we haven't really been having a crazy amount of tank switches as well coming up onto it to further complicate things. So with Golden Guardians taking that win, that's also going to start setting our eyes here on Theater of Pain, which again been a time trial. And again here, Dratnos, Golden Guardians has a steep advantage from that perspective.
Yeah, so Golden Guardians time trial time in Theater is something on the order of 3 minutes faster than the one put up by P2 Angels. That being said, Theater of Pain is a volatile dungeon. We've seen both of our, actually, I think like 3 out of our 4 teams so far this weekend that have played in Theater have had at least one full team wipe. Golden Guardians, we've seen in the past, have, I think, some clean runs, but also some less clean runs in this dungeon. So it's a dungeon that has a lot of difficult pulls, particularly, I think, in that Gore Chop wing. Those gas bag pulls are very dangerous, and there's not a lot of space in the areas you fight those mobs, and there's a lot of mechanics that will zone you, and a lot of unavoidable damage and unavoidable stuff as well that you just have to, deal with throughput. So when you have those sorts of mechanics combined with Sanguine and Grievous, right? Sanguine is going to further enhance those positioning difficulties. Grievous is going to further enhance those throughput challenges. And those two affixes plus Fortified team up to make those already hard pulls into some of the most difficult content I could imagine.
Yeah, and what is it specifically about that construct wing? Is it how well they're grouping the mobs together? Are people just not stacking, so some of the jumpers are getting all over the place, and then casts start getting missed? What is it that these teams sort of be struggling with, or is it just sometimes you just get unlucky with the frontal backle and all the other cleave damage going out?
Yeah, I mean, you have all those things going on at the same time, right? You're trying to position in such a way that the mobs are jumping favorably, and you're needing to make sure you don't stand in the green puddles, and you're needing to make sure that you're baiting and or dodging the fronty backles in such a way that they're not going to kill you or your teammates. And your tank is having to keep the mobs moving as they're dying, such that there aren't sanguine puddles under everything. And you need to do a ton of damage and a ton of healing because you're pulling a bunch of stuff all at once, and there's Grievous going on at the same time. And there's kicks and dispels and stuff as well to get in those pulls. There's mobs
and
you
the
need to
mobs
be like
are jumping around. Once you need to interrupt, right? So sometimes you might have to like walk into a backle or frontal to interrupt a cast, which can be incredibly dangerous unless you have some sort of like immunity ready. It's definitely incredibly difficult.
And it sort of compounds as well when everybody's responsibilities are just kind of all over the place. We're so used to a lot of groups on live servers being able to always have like the Ring of Peace, or always being able to have the Ursul's Vortex to be able to just force everything together, but also just splitting up a lot of those pulls. So it's one of the most dangerous things with Theater can be, in a lot of cases, some of those trash pulls that they're almost forced into doing. We saw it, for example, in the Undead wing as well, Nagura, onto the different platforms where they're pulling multiple Maguses on top of each other and just relying on AoE stuns, AoE Sigil of Silence coming out as well to lock them down before all the casts start getting off to get killed.
Yeah, I mean, those crazy pulls, they really are on a timer. If you don't manage to finish them off in a certain amount of burst window, then you're going to be running out of interrupts, running out of just defensives or offensives to be able to deal with all of this. So we've seen, these Magus pulls, as you mentioned, they all cast Bone Spear that one-shot you if you don't interrupt it. So if you don't manage to finish them off in the Silence Sigil or in the AoE stun, then all of a sudden you're in big trouble. And the same thing happens with this crazy pull that we see in front of Gore Chop. If you run out of damage, as we've seen when one of those casts goes through that actually reduces your damage down by 20%, then all of a sudden everything just falls apart because you don't manage to finish off the trash. All of a sudden there's too much damage going on in the group and everything just falls apart. So they have to have the damage, and they also need the perfect interrupts and the perfect CC and utility that they have assigned for these pulls.
Definitely. And also we noticed a couple times with some of the prideful skips going on, using those invisibility pots right after the activate prideful and get out of range. Another little thing that gets compounded is making sure they have all the Grievous cleansed before they end up hitting those invis pots so they don't get broken out early. So a lot of pressure onto the team, a lot of pressure onto everybody in this Theater of Pain run as we're about to get started with Golden Guardians up 1 here in top.
Golden Guardians really hoping to come out on top in this dungeon. Pitu Angels, though, you'll see what I've done there. As they're getting on for the first big pull of the dungeon, this is going to be all the trash into the boss here. You can see a trap coming out from Pitu Angels, keeping one of those mobs CC'd near the front. It's going to be Paralysis achieving the same effect for Golden Guardians. Both teams deciding not to fight all the trash all at once here. Leave that one for later. They have a lot of... Wow, look at the health, look at the damage that Golden Guardians is actually pumping out here. I mean, both teams have gotten started at right about the same time, but Fired Up is just incinerating this pull.
Yeah, so I actually saw a difference again in PI targets here. I think this is something that I actually saw Echo discuss in practice as I was watching their stream when they did this exact pull. I think they were not sure who to give the PI to. Was it the mage or is it actually the hunter who gets the PI for this pull? And it looked like Golden Guardians was giving PI to their hunter, while Pitu's Angels decided to give PI to the mage. So definitely a little bit of a difference here in offensive cooldowns usage. And it looks like Golden Guardians is dealing with this a lot better than Pitu's Angels, as their bosses are already starting to die right now. Pitu's Angels struggled a little bit with interrupts, it looked like, as the bosses were just spreading out all over the place, and they didn't manage to get that cleave damage onto all of the mobs.
Yeah, if you've been watching the health bars as well, Pitu Angels have basically been under constant Grievous pressure for this entire pull, whereas JB and the interrupts have done a really good job of keeping Golden Guardians topped so that they aren't all in danger the whole time. Pitu Angels, I mean, they've had 2 or 3 players ticking Grievous on them basically this entire pull, and that has been so sketchy by comparison, as Golden Guardians really well executed. They're heading right downstairs already. Moving in to the Shackled Soul area, JB on that Necrolord Covenant so that he can get access to the movement speed and the versatility of those banners. And they're going to be using their Invis Pots to move through this area. You can see Yoda. Red Light has to stop and wait for the swirly before he can keep moving. And they're going to grab a bunch of souls, not all of them. They can get some with the boss later. Put down the Ring of Frost. And this is going to be a Sigil Chains Ring of Frost combo to get everything nice and grouped up, and then the Sigil of Silence. And as long as they can kill all these mobs before that Sigil expires and their next AoE stun expires afterwards, they should be in good shape. There's the leg sweep. And now all of the mobs are dying. It's the Ring of Peace coming out as well. Sanguine, beautifully managed with the Ring of Peace right at the end there. No healing at all from the Affix. Textbook execution of a very, very sketchy pull. That's a pull that it looks so good, but if it had gone on for 5 more seconds, they would have been out of stuff to deal with everything. So it's very important that they managed to do it as quickly as they just did.
Yeah, one more thing I want to mention about this pull is, as you said, they're leaving some of those Shackled Souls behind to be able to pull them with the boss. And I think not only is it efficient to, of course, finish off the Shackled Souls with the boss itself, but I think they also do it for exact pride timings too, because committing a invisibility potion just to skip 3 of these Shackled Souls doesn't seem worth it. It's only worth it because they get different pride timings that is just more it's just better for them later on in the dungeon. Because they don't have the Shadow Melt available, they actually use it to get out of combat with the mob in the very first room, in the first trash area with the first boss, because they want to have one of the mobs left when they get to the last boss area to be able to finish off that one at the very end to get the 100% pride. So just using that invisibility potion to get better pride timings because they don't have the Shadow Melt available to them. So very, very smart routing by these MDI teams here.
Yeah, and another textbook execution of Sanguine management coming out from Golden Guardians. This is really impressive as well because, again, their tank was not their tank at the start of the season, right? Yoda was playing DPS for Golden Guardians since for a long time, and only swapped over recently to playing that tank role. And Sanguine, particularly difficult affix to manage the tank. They've been doing a really good job of, I think, preventing any Sanguine healing at all so far this dungeon from what I've seen. Pitu Angels, on the other hand, they are also doing a good job throughout this dungeon, although you did see earlier on that Shackled Soul pull that it did last an extra 20 or 30 seconds because there was a little bit of less perfect Sanguine management right at the end of the pull. And those are the sorts of time differences that really can open up a gap between these teams and might help to explain why their time trial times are 3 minutes apart. As a little bit of Sanguine healing, actually, just as I praised them, coming out for Golden Guardians. Not too bad that they're going to use the Touch of Death to equalize everything and finish off this Bone Reaver. And this will be them just about in the Prideful spawning range. I think it won't quite spawn the Pride, and they'll get it on the next platform. Let's see. 35% now. They're going to go up to 38. Yeah, and they will get their Pride right on this final platform. We'll see exactly how they want to handle this, because teams sometimes just fight the Pride here, or sometimes they'll all take the portal immediately and then fight the Pride upstairs instead, or and save a little bit of time that way.
Yeah, I think most teams have actually adapted to just finish off the Soulbinder and first, as you can see, just completely getting bursted down, so they can cleave down the Pride with this higher HP Dark Speaker. The Dark Speaker having a little bit more HP, so they just make sure they have enough damage on the Magus or the Soul Speaker, and then just... Oh, Yoda actually getting hit by the frontal. Did manage to jump back. Of course, Demon Hunter having this huge amount of utility. They don't care about any of that stuff. They just, maybe even tanks it for fun. He's like, yeah, just let me just stand in that one. I can jump back.
Yeah, back in BFA, we would say we were doing that just to proc null barrier. Don't have as good of an excuse this time, though. Yeah, this is a really great point, though, because these casters, I mean, as long as you can dodge the tornadoes or have your Demon Hunter or whatever get hit by them, the rest of the stuff they do is just interruptible and tank damage, and so not a problem at all, but it has so much health that it's a very efficient thing to fight at the same time as a Pride, and so Golden Guardian's going to finish that off, advance to 43% count, and they're bringing basically a full duration Prideful buff onto this next boss fight. That's going to be really favorable for them. Now, they do need to be careful with how they manage the Shackled Souls that they are going to pull into this boss fight, because they want to avoid Sanguine healing the boss if at all possible. The boss is rooted, so if they drop a Sanguine Puddle under it, it is going to full heal. So they really need to make sure that they're using stuff like Ring of Peace to get those mobs away from underneath the boss as they're dying. There's the 2 Shackled Souls that they're going to be fighting right now. And watch for how they manage them as they're about to die. The third one coming in as well.
Yeah, and today I learned from Cyronic that these Sanguine Pools don't actually heal that boss because he's levitating in the air, so he can actually just drop it underneath the boss if you feel like it. But the Ring of Peace is still being used by Golden Guardians just to make sure, because you never know with these kind of things. So Golden Guardians making sure they place the pools outside, as they have a huge amount of single target here as well on Koltharok. Pitu's Angels just now finishing off their 40% Pride, so they definitely are a little bit behind. And it definitely was not difference in strategies, right? Because so far they have played the exact same strat so far as I have seen. It really was, as you mentioned earlier, just worse Sanguine management and also like worse optimization of, you know, stacking up the bosses in the first boss room, getting enough cleave damage off and so on. So the strategies are there. They just need to execute the Sanguine a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, definitely credit to Pitu Angels so far. They're on a 0-death series as well, right? Both teams have not died so far this series. And I think it represents a big improvement, not just for Pitu Angels, but for Golden Guardians as well. I mean, it's something that they haven't been able to consistently do so far this season. And the fact that they're able to do it now, especially in this match, which, as we said, it actually really matters for their ability to make it to the global finals. They're coming up big when they need to, and potentially in a series where they can't afford to have practiced these dungeons all that much. So it's definitely good news and a sign that the team may be ramping up as our season goes on here. They're getting ready now for this first pull in the Gorechop Wing. This one isn't the traditionally most dangerous one, even though it's a very large pull. It's usually the stuff downstairs that's caused teams more trouble. Ooh, a Decaying Filth Cast going off, though, is going to be a little bit of a pain here for Golden Guardians. Looks like they're mostly going to be okay. These mobs are pretty difficult to manage when there are Sanguine Puddles around because of the way that they do just jump around. You've got to be really careful of positioning the entire group around the Affix. You can see the Ring of Peace being used as stuff is dying, and everybody's sort of moving in a coordinated fashion to avoid too much Sanguine problems here. Really, really well done so far by Golden Guardians, taking care of this pull nice and efficiently. I think there's one mob trapped up on the bridge that they haven't gotten yet, but they've gotten everything else in this first part of the Gorechop Wing all in one big pull.
Yeah, I think this is actually the second Butcher that they just completely choose to skip here. That's why Lip on the Hunter just went ahead previously before they even walked in. Just made sure to use that freezing trap on that Butcher and then misdirect the patrol on top of the tank to make sure they gather up everything. So they're just using their Shadow Melt here to de-aggro the Butcher that was CC'd that they're still in combat with, and now they're moving on. So this is going to be the most dangerous pull of this whole dungeon. They're up to 58%, so that means they're going to be pulling this gas bag with the Butcher pack and the whole bridge while spawning the Pride as soon as like one mob dies. So this is going to be incredibly dangerous. We haven't seen a single team execute this pull yet on the tournament.
Yeah, this is so rough, especially with those Grievous stacks going. Now the Pride is starting to tick on everybody as well. The Sanguine Puddles needing to be dodged, dodging the Prideful Eruption as well, and dodging the Fronty Backle, and Golden Guardians have done it. They have made this pull look so easy, but that is so hard. And this is a pull that has caused them problems even before Sanguine and Grievous were in the mix in previous weeks, but they have made it look like, I mean, they've made it look so good. That's something that even Echo wasn't able to execute cleanly in their run earlier. So, I mean, this is such good news for Golden Guardians, the fact that worked out so well for them. They are now at 70% trash. They've cleaved down this Pride with that pull as well. And, I mean, this is looking like a potential best team in the tournament type play so far from Golden Guardians.
Yeah, this was just incredibly well executed by Golden Guardians. As you said, it almost looked easy once they had finished off all of the trash mobs and there was only the Pride left. But 3 other teams that tried this exact same pull on the tournament already failed to execute this properly and just had a full team wipe trying to do so. So really well done by Golden Guardians to be able to pull this off. And now they have to deal with Gourd Shop. The Butcher and the Diseased Horror can be dangerous, but really good use of the Hunter utility here, just rooting those ads with the binding shots to make sure that Yoda does not have to fully tank those 2 mobs while also tanking Gourd Shop as well.
Yeah, dodging these hooks, and now comes the Sanguine management moment. You can see they've got to make sure they don't have this Butcher get underneath Gorchop when he's casting something, and they've done it, so that's really good there. Whenever there's bosses or any kind of CC immune guys that just cast for like 5 seconds in a row sometimes you'll have these moments where you spawn Sanguine underneath them, and then you're like, oh no, what have I done? And they start just chain casting at you, healing up to full. But Golden Guardian's doing a really good job of moving everything as it's dying to prevent that sort of calamity from occurring. And they've avoided, again, any meaningful Sanguine healing. Basically, this entire dungeon, there's 73% count. Gorchop is dying here at the 12-minute mark for them. I mean, this is potentially on pace to be a fastest run in Theater of Pain type thing.
Definitely. Pitu's Angels now did manage to finish off this bridge pull as well. They did not do the same pull, so they basically triggered their Pride earlier, finished off the Pride, and then did this pull. They also even committed their Bloodlust to this as well. So you can see how dangerous this pull is. Pitu's Angels committing their Pride buff and the Bloodlust to it, while Golden Guardians did it without Pride buff, without Bloodlust, just going in there, pulling everything on top, spawning Pride midway through. So really well done as they're now moving on to this last area here. We've seen some interesting strats come out here as well from previous teams where they just they basically just CC'd the captain in the next patrol trash pack and just pulled it on top of the mini bosses, because these mini bosses of course have a huge amount of HP, so it takes a long time to kill them. That's why they try to pull as much trash on top as possible, but there really just isn't that much trash in this whole area, so they're very limited in how they can make these kind of pulls more efficient. But those mini bosses give a lot of percentage.
Yeah, Lip using that bursting shot there to prevent the mob from sitting in Sanguine for too long. Good use of the knockback utility. Prevent the affix from being too much trouble. JB is going to activate that 3rd and final banner of the dungeon for a little bit of movement speed and verse for the whole group. Again, the Necrolord Covenant that we see priests playing. It's mostly just in this dungeon that we're seeing that Necrolord for the benefit of the versatility and the movement speed for the entire group when you use those banners. They do have to finish off this mini-boss. This mini-boss will trigger Pride for them, and what we've seen them do in the past is spawn this Pride right in the doorway. It's important to not spawn it too close to the middle of this room, because this is where you get sent down to during the duel. So if you spawn a Pride here and then skip it, you will encounter it again during the boss fight, and the boss fight is not when you want to encounter a Pride. So they're going to all be standing right where they want that Pride to be, and then they will be using their Invis Potion so they don't get in combat with it, and they'll deal with it later. You can see very well coordinated movement from the entire group to handle that exact thing.
Combat.
Oh, except for... No, yeah, they've done it. They've skipped the Pride.
Okay, whew.
It's still pulsing
it
out
looked
some
like
damage
it for a second.
Yeah. But
yeah, because it's dangerous as well, because you need to use that invisibility potion on your whole group to be able to skip the Prides, and it's actually pretty dangerous with these affixes because you have Grievous, which means that your stealth is actually going to get broken if you get a tick from that dot on you. So everyone needs to be healed out of Grievous range before you can use that Invis potion. And on top of that, you also have Sanguine. I've already seen that happen, that people used the Invis potion and then they walked through the Sanguine pool after killing them up, and it broke their stealth. So that's also something you have to care about.
It actually does look like it slightly went wrong, and JB ended up using the Shadow Meld in addition to the Invis Potion, and that ended up working for them. So, I mean, credit to them, a good recovery.
There might be a small issue, right? Because they have this captaincy seat, and they need to Shadow Meld off the aggro from this one, because they don't want to deal with it. So we'll see how they deal with this, because of course they still have to finish up this mini-boss, which might take some time. Maybe the Shadow Melt is actually going to come back up. We'll see as we take an eye on this Shadow Melt. Haruja, also one of those mini bosses with a huge amount of HP, of course, throwing these bleed effects on their team as well. You can see JB being pretty low on mana because he has to heal all of those bleed effects. Lip also using Turtle here to just completely avoid one of those cleavers, one of the bleeds.
Yeah, and it looks like Shadow Melt is basically back up as of right now, so they should be okay. They should all be able to use it to skip that captain that they've currently got CC'd and the next mini-boss, which I think is going to be their plan. And remember, at the very start of the dungeon, they did leave a mob right at the top from the very first pull of the dungeon. So the reason that they did that, not only did it make the very first pull of the dungeon easier, but they can kill that during or right after the last boss fight to hit their 100% and avoid killing the 100% pride as well. So here goes Golden Guardians now. They have all used their melds once again. It was back up for JP, fired up using the Invis instead. And they are all through now, and they're going to be able to get on the boss here. This is the second to last boss, fortified as well, so it shouldn't take too much time for them. Let's take a look at the timer situation right now, because right now we're at 16 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock. The time to beat for the fastest time trial time came from Echo at 18 minutes 30. It's going to be pretty tight. I actually don't know if Golden Guardians are going to be able to surpass that time trial time, but wow, their run has looked so good so far.
Yeah, definitely incredibly clean. As Adrian actually went down for Pitu's Angels, unfortunately. Yeah, first death here by Adrian. Looked like he immediately released as well. Knight going down too, their tank going down. This is going to be pretty bad for them as they're fighting this mini-boss. And all the Arbalists who are just throwing bleeds on them. This is actually incredibly dangerous. They might have to just reset this with their Shadow Meld as they're walking backwards. And because of their Windwalker releasing, did they actually deal with the Pride? Because if they skipped it, this is going to be dangerous. I think they actually dealt with it. Otherwise, there was no way their Windwalker can come back, right?
Yeah, it seems like they are definitely right there at the start of the wing, so maybe they didn't kill that Pride. Okay. Credit to that. I mean, credit to Pitu Angels though. First death in the series coming right at the end of the second map of the series is that is impressive in its own right, and they've been playing very well so far. This has been a run they've put up that absolutely could be competitive with a lot of different teams, and it's looking very good, even compared to their own time trial run. But Golden Guardians just on another level here entirely. 18 minutes. I mean, as I say that, JP actually does go down, but he'll be able to release. So this may actually have been intended even, because that release point that he will be
they have the captain still, did you see?
Will be further up. Yeah, the captain is still in combat with them, so maybe their entire meld thing didn't quite go as planned earlier, or maybe their plan was just, we'll meld off that captain even later in time. You can see Shakib firing off some Vivifies here. They do have some Grievous ticking on their group. JB has released, but there's the Pride between them and between where they want to be. So it looks like they are going to kill that Pride now. While Fired Up runs ahead and will go and start that last boss RP. So that's going to be the plan here for Golden Guardians. Their first death of the series just come in, but again, not bad either. As time has already, Echo would have already finished with their time trial run. So I wonder what on earth Echo are doing to be this fast in this dungeon. I mean, that is insane. We saw earlier them having some difficulty in this dungeon, so maybe their route is even more volatile but faster. So far, so impressive, though, by Golden Guardians to keep things this clean with their route that is, I think, doing this dungeon in a pull or two faster than we're seeing Pitu do.
Yeah, and they're struggling a little bit with this Pride here because, of course, they don't want to commit any offensive cooldowns. And their mage was not here at the start because Fired Up was triggering this RP event here to spawn Mordretha. So even harder on the healer. No one's using offensive cooldowns, and one of their damage dealers is not here. So good job by JB making sure everyone is staying alive as they're now popping all of their cooldowns here and the Bloodlust as well that the Pitu Angels had already used previously in one of those trash packs. Golden Guardians saving it for this last moment. And if you look at the timer, they're really close to 20 minutes. So really close to getting off one more Bloodlust usage, theoretically, if they would be saving it. But because most of the times are just slightly short, they're very free. They can use their Bloodlust very freely in this dungeon if they're not going to be getting a third usage off anyway. And you can see the Ritualist there being in-kept in the corner. This is going to be the last mob they have to kill to get the 100% enemy forces. And it looks like they're getting it in right now to cleave it down with the boss.
Yeah, this is going to be a beautiful finish to the dungeon here, as they do need to finish off more Dretha, but they've made such short work of this boss by saving the Bloodlust for it, not feeling the need to use it earlier. They just have all of their cooldowns all lining up, and this boss is going to melt in something like a minute, and then they just have to finish off that Ritualist, and that will stop the clock for Golden Guardians. Something on the order of a 20-minute and 45-second run for them. Impressive work as they're going to close out the series 2-0 against Pitu Angels.
That's right, Golden Guardians taking that victory, and at the start of the series we talked about how much pressure there was for Golden Guardians to win and not be in trouble against Pitu Angels, who really had to focus super hard on this series. But Golden Guardians showing some very good polish, some extremely good performance, and this is what we've been wanting to see for them for quite a while here, Zyro, as this is going to be the beginning of their lower bracket run here to take that victory.
Yep, for sure. And they're finding themselves in a similar scenario to Cup 2, where they, won their first lower bracket match, but now they have to go up against a team in